There is a primate on this island with a middle finger so thin and so long that it looks broken. It is not broken. It is the most specialized finger in the entire animal kingdom. A tool built for one job, tapping on dead wood at night, listening for the hollow echo of a tunnel underneath, and then using that same finger to hook a grub out through a hole it gnawed with teeth that never stop growing. Local legend says if this animal points that finger at you, you will die. For decades, that belief got it killed on sight across large parts of the island. It is almost extinct because of a finger. This is Madagascar, an island that broke away from the rest of the world roughly 88 million years ago and has been alone ever since. More than 90% of the mammals here and most of everything else exist nowhere else on the planet. Subscribe to Doc Wild 4K and turn on the bell. Every week we go somewhere most cameras never reach. Tell us in the comments what country you are watching from. Now let's go. Because there is a predator here shaped like a fusion of a cat and a mongoose that can chase prey through the treetops at full speed. There is a chameleon that completes its entire life, hatching, growing, breeding, and dying in about 4 months, faster than almost any reptile on Earth. There is a fish in the rivers here that survives the dry season by pausing its own development underground for months, and there is a spider whose web is strong enough to span an entire river. And there is the animal with the finger, which we are coming back to at the end. Everything that was on this island when it separated kept evolving in isolation. Everything that arrived afterward had to cross open ocean to get there. Start with the forest itself, because it explains everything that lives in it. Madagascar split from mainland Africa around 160 million years ago, and then from India around 88 million years ago, and after that it drifted alone. Whatever ancestors were already on the island kept evolving with no new competition arriving by land. Whatever arrived later had to raft in, swept out on floating vegetation during storms, surviving weeks at sea, and washing up by pure chance. That is an extraordinarily narrow filter. Almost nothing survives an ocean crossing on a mat of branches. What did survive found an island with almost no large predators and empty ecological niches waiting to be filled. And it filled them in ways nowhere else on Earth did. The island itself splits into distinct worlds. Rainforest runs along the eastern coast, soaked by trade winds off the Indian Ocean. The central highlands rise into cooler plateau, and the west and south fall into dry forest and, at the extreme, spiny desert, a landscape of octopus trees and thorned succulents that looks more like something imagined than something photographed. Different rainfall, different soil, different isolation on each side of the same island. And that is why the animal you find in the east is often nothing like the one in the west, even when they are close relatives. Now the lemurs, because they are the reason this island is famous and almost nobody outside Madagascar understands what they actually are, lemurs are primates, the same broad group as monkeys, apes, and us, but they split off from that lineage extremely early, before monkeys existed anywhere on Earth. On every other continent, lemur-like primates were eventually outcompeted and replaced by more advanced primates. In Madagascar, that competition never arrived, because nothing more advanced ever crossed the water. So an entire branch of primate evolution, extinct everywhere else on the planet, kept going here in isolation for tens of millions of years and diversified into something over 100 living species, ranging from an animal that weighs about 30 grams to one the size of a large dog. The Indri is the largest living lemur, and the sound it makes is the reason people know its name before they know its face. Indri pairs sing together at dawn, a rising, wailing call that can carry for several kilometers through the forest canopy, used to declare territory and to keep contact with neighboring family groups. It is one of the loudest sounds produced by any land mammal relative to body size, and researchers studying it have found structure in the songs that resembles rhythm in a way very few animals outside humans and a handful of birds display. The Indri has never survived in captivity for more than a short period. Every attempt has failed for reasons that remain unclear, which means this animal exists only here, in this forest, or nowhere. The ring-tailed lemur is the one everyone recognizes. Gray body, black and white, ringed tail, held straight up like a flag when the group moves through open ground. It lives in matriarchal troops where females outrank every male, and it uses scent constantly. Males have glands on their wrists that they rub against their own tails, then wave the tail at rivals in what researchers call stink fights, settling disputes through chemical intimidation instead of physical combat. 2 more lemurs are worth stopping on, because they show how far this island pushed the same basic body plan in opposite directions. The Varro's sifaka cannot walk normally on the ground at all. Its legs are built almost entirely for leaping between vertical trunks, propelling itself sideways through the canopy in bounds that can cover 10 meters. When it does have to cross open ground, it does something that looks almost comic. It turns to face sideways and hops on its hind legs with its arms raised for balance, a gait found in no other primate on Earth and immediately recognizable to anyone who has seen it, even briefly on film. At the opposite extreme is the mouse lemur, and there are several species, all among the smallest primates alive. Some weighing barely 30 grams, small enough to sit in a closed hand. They are nocturnal, solitary foragers. And during the harshest part of the dry season, some species enter torpor, dropping their body temperature and metabolism for days at a time to survive periods when insects and fruit are scarce. The same strategy used by animals, many times their size, in far colder climates. Between an animal that leaps sideways through the canopy and one that shuts down its own body to survive a drought, the same evolutionary starting point produced 2 solutions that share almost nothing except the word lemur. And then there is the ai, which we already met, and which we will finish with. Sharing the forest floor and the treetops with the lemurs is a predator that looks like nothing else in the world, because it essentially had to invent itself from scratch. The fossa is the largest carnivorous mammal native to Madagascar, roughly the size of a small cougar, with a long body, a long tail nearly equal to its body length, and retractable claws unusual for anything outside the cat family. For a long time, taxonomists could not agree what it even was. It has characteristics of cats, of mongooses, and of civets, and it turns out to be its own distinct lineage that evolved on the island in isolation, converging on a cat-like body plan because that shape works for the job it does. And the job is hunting lemurs in the trees at speed. The fossa can rotate its ankles to grip a trunk descending headfirst, the same trick tree-climbing cats and squirrels use, and it pursues prey through the canopy with an agility that looks more like a squirrel than a predator that size should have. On the ground, it can run down prey in the open as well, and it is one of the only animals on the island large enough and fast enough to take an adult lemur outright. Fossas breed in an unusual and highly public way. Females select a specific tree, return to it every year, and mate with a series of different males over several days while others wait nearby. A system researchers still do not fully understand the logic of. There are probably only a few thousand left, because the forest they need in large connected blocks is exactly the forest that has been cleared fastest. Before the reptiles, one more mammal, because it may be the strangest of them all. The tenrec looks at first glance like a hedgehog, and for over a century that resemblance misled people about what it actually is. It is not related to hedgehogs at all. It is part of an entirely separate lineage that reached Madagascar early and radiated into an extraordinary range of forms, some spiny and hedgehog-like, some resembling shrews, some resembling otters, and one, the streaked tenrec, covered in barbed quills it can detach into a threat, and capable of something almost no other mammal on Earth does. It rubs specialized quills together on its back to produce a high-frequency sound, using its own body as a stridulating instrument the way a cricket does, to keep a family group together while foraging through dense leaf litter at night. Some tenrex species have the lowest recorded body temperature of any mammal, dropping close to the surrounding air during periods of torpor, and one holds the record among all placental mammals for the largest number of offspring in a single litter, over 30 in the largest documented cases, far beyond what almost any other mammal of comparable size produces. One ancestor. No competition arriving to correct the direction, and it filled the role of hedgehog, shrew, mole, and otter all at once across different species because there was nothing else on the island already doing those jobs. Now the reptiles, because Madagascar's chameleons are not simply colorful lizards, they are an entire evolutionary experiment that ran nowhere else at this scale. Roughly half of all chameleon species on Earth live only on this island. Some reach nearly 70 centimeters. Others are so small they can stand on the head of a matchstick, discovered only in the last 2 decades in leaf litter that had been searched for a century. The eyes are the part people underestimate. Each one sits in an independent turret and can rotate almost a full circle, and the 2 eyes work separately, one scanning forward while the other checks behind, feeding 2 different images to a brain that somehow does not need them to agree. When a chameleon spots prey with one eye, both eyes then lock onto the same target, giving it the depth perception needed for the strike. And the strike is the fastest tongue movement recorded in any vertebrate. The tongue accelerates off the body at forces far beyond what a fighter jet pilot experiences, covers a distance greater than the chameleon's own body length in a fraction of a second, and the tip is coated in mucus so thick and so adhesive that it functions less like glue and more like a suction cup working through surface tension. An insect struck by that tongue has essentially no chance to react. Color change is not primarily camouflage. It is communication, mood, temperature regulation, and above all, social signaling, controlled by layers of specialized cells containing nanocrystals that the chameleon can adjust, altering how light bounces off its skin in real time. And one species pushes the entire life cycle to a speed that seems impossible for a reptile. Laborde's chameleon hatches, and from that moment it is racing a clock. It grows explosively fast, reaches sexual maturity in a matter of weeks, mates, and the females lay eggs and then simply die. The entire population, all at once, at the end of the same short season, for roughly 8 or 9 months of the year. There is not a single adult of this species alive anywhere on Earth. Only eggs, buried and waiting. It spends more of its life as an egg than as a living animal, and it is one of the shortest lifespans of any land vertebrate on the planet. Deeper in the leaf litter, an insect solved the problem of being eaten by looking exactly like the thing nobody eats. The giant Malagasy leaf insect is flattened, veined, and edged in a way that mimics a dead or damaged leaf so precisely that researchers photographing it in the field have lost track of individuals set down for scale a moment earlier. It even rocks slightly as it walks, mimicking the movement of a leaf disturbed by wind, motion camouflage layered on top of shape camouflage. And in the rivers running down from the highlands, several small fish survive the dry season by refusing to stay fish for a while. Certain killifish here undergo diapause, a state in which the embryo inside the egg halts development entirely and waits, buried in mud that dries to the hardness of brick for months at a time, resuming growth only when rain returns and softens the ground around it. The adult fish may not survive the dry season at all. The species does inside a paused embryo, underground, doing nothing. And 2 more before we pause, because both of them turn invisibility into an art form. The Madagascar hissing cockroach is large, wingless, and famous mostly for the sound it makes by forcing air through modified breathing pores on its abdomen, a hiss used to startle predators, to signal aggression between males competing for territory, and, during actual combat, to intimidate a rival mid-fight. Males carry raised horn-like projections on the thorax and headbutt each other over females and feeding sites, wrestling with a persistence that looks more like two small animals than two insects. And the satanic leaf-tailed gecko may be the single best camouflaged vertebrate on the island. Its body, tail, and even the fringe of skin along its jaw and limbs are shaped and modeled to match a specific dead leaf, edges included, down to fake patches of simulated leaf decay and small notches that mimic insect damage. It hunts by night and spends the day motionless against bark, and it has been photographed at close range by researchers who did not realize it was there until it moved. Let's pause here, because what comes next is stranger still, including a spider whose web can span an entire river, and the animal with the finger, which we are finally going back to. If this island is holding you, subscribe to Doc Wild 4K right now. We go somewhere most cameras never reach every week, and subscribers always see the new ones first. Turn on the bell so you do not miss it. Let's keep going. Between the trees on either side of Malagasy rivers, spanning gaps that can exceed 25 meters, is a web built by Darwin's bark spider. This is among the largest orb webs ever measured for any spider on Earth, and the silk that makes it possible is, by tensile toughness, one of the strongest biological materials ever recorded in comparative testing against other spider silks. The spider builds bridge lines first, sometimes casting silk out over open water and letting wind carry it until it catches on the far bank, then reinforcing that initial thread until it can support the full structure. The finished web can contain over a square meter of capture area, engineered to intercept insects flying low over the river surface, a niche essentially no other spider on the island exploits, because no other web could survive out there. On the forest floor and in the canopy above it, Madagascar's birds have their own strange story, and the strangest of them is now gone. The elephant bird once stood up to 3 meters tall and weighed close to half a ton, among the heaviest birds known to have existed, laying eggs so large a single one held the equivalent of roughly 150 chicken eggs. It went extinct within the last 1,000 years, likely from a combination of hunting and habitat loss following human arrival on the island, and it is now widely believed to be connected to the roc, the giant bird of Arabian and Persian legend, described by traders who may have seen its eggs or heard second-hand accounts from Madagascar. A creature from Middle Eastern mythology may trace back to a real bird that lived and vanished on this one island. What survives today includes the Madagascar fish eagle, one of the rarest raptors on Earth with only a few hundred breeding pairs remaining, and the Vasa parrots, large, mostly black, with a mating system where a single dominant female may mate with numerous males across a season, an arrangement that is close to the reverse of what almost every other parrot species does. And in the spiny forest of the far south, where octopus trees and thorned succulents replace the rainforest entirely, an entirely different set of animals has adapted to conditions that barely exist anywhere else on the island. Radiated tortoises, patterned with a dazzling star-shaped design across each scute, can live well past a century, moving slowly through a landscape so thorned that almost nothing else can push through the vegetation the way this animal can, protected by a shell hard enough to shrug off spines that would tear other skin. Sharing that dry forest with the tortoises is a smaller, more secretive relative of the fossa. The Phaneloca, or Malagasy civet, hunts frogs, insects, and small vertebrates on the forest floor at night, marking territory with scent glands and moving with a low, elongated body built for pushing through dense undergrowth rather than for speed in the open. And rising above the spiny forest and the dry woodlands of the west are trees that look like nothing else on the continent nearby. Madagascar holds 6 of the world's 9 baobab species, and nowhere else on Earth has anywhere close to that concentration. Some individual baobabs here are believed to be well over 1,000 years old. Their swollen trunks storing enormous reserves of water that allow them to survive months of drought and to flower and fruit on a schedule the surrounding forest is built around. A stand of them along a single stretch of dirt road near Morondava has become one of the most recognized tree silhouettes on the planet. Entirely because nothing else on Earth grows quite like this, in quite this concentration, anywhere else. And here, out of options above ground, one bird went underground entirely. The long-tailed ground roller lives almost its whole life on the forest floor of the dry western woodlands, walking rather than flying, feeding on insects and small reptiles among the leaf litter. To nest, it digs a tunnel over 1 meter long into the ground, ending in a hidden chamber, and both parents take turns excavating it with their beaks over a period of weeks before the eggs are even laid. It is a bird that behaves like a burrowing mammal on an island where the ordinary rules about which animal does what job never fully applied. Now finally, the animal with the finger. The IEI is a lemur. But for a long time, nobody was certain of that because almost nothing about it looks like a lemur. Enormous membranous ears that can rotate independently, continuously growing incisors, more like a rodent's than a primate's, wide eyes adapted for full darkness, and that finger, thin, skeletal, with an extra joint of mobility that no other primate finger on Earth has. It fills the ecological role that woodpeckers fill on every other continent, and it does it with none of a woodpecker's equipment. At night, it moves along tree trunks tapping rapidly with that elongated middle finger, up to 8 times a second, and listens through those enormous ears for the change in resonance that means the wood underneath is hollow, meaning there is a tunnel, meaning there is almost certainly a grub inside it. Once it identifies a spot, it gnaws through the bark with those rodent-like incisors, then reaches in with the same thin finger, hooks the larva, and draws it out. Percussive foraging, it is called. And outside of Madagascar, it is essentially a woodpecker's job. The IEI reinvented it with a finger instead of a beak, evolving independently toward the same solution millions of years and an ocean away from any woodpecker. It is almost impossible to overstate how badly this animal has been treated by superstition. Across large parts of Madagascar, a folk belief holds that the IEI is an omen of death, and that if it points its long middle finger at a person, that person will die unless the animal itself is killed first. For generations, IEIs seen near villages were killed on sight, not out of malice exactly, but out of fear passed down through generations who genuinely believed the alternative was worse. Combined with habitat loss across its forest range, the species is now considered endangered, and it remains one of the most difficult lemurs to study precisely because it is nocturnal, solitary, and still avoided by many of the people who share its forest. The finger that makes it one of the most sophisticated foraging tools in the animal kingdom is the same finger that nearly ended it. Here is what I want to leave you with. Madagascar separated from the rest of the world before most of the animals we consider familiar even existed, and everything that has happened here since has happened without correction from anywhere else. No large cats arrived to hunt the lemurs the way they hunt primates on every other continent, so a mongoose relative reinvented itself as one instead. No woodpeckers arrived to work the dead wood, so a primate grew a finger and did the job with it. Nothing constrained the chameleon's eyes, or the fish's ability to wait out a drought as an unborn embryo, or a bird's decision to nest 1 meter underground. Every strange thing you saw today is not an exception to how evolution normally works. It is what evolution does by default when nothing from outside is there to interrupt it. This island has been running that experiment alone for 88 million years, and more than 90% of what lives here exists nowhere else, on any other landmass in the entire world. Tell me in the comments which of these left you speechless. The fossa that reinvented itself as a big cat, the chameleon that spends most of its life as an egg, the spider whose web spans a river, or the primate with the finger that is both its genius and its curse. Leave a like if this journey was worth your time, subscribe if you have not already, and share this with someone who thinks Madagascar is just the movie. Until the next one, go somewhere wild. Doc Wild 4K